Greetings, and welcome to The World According to Pleiades on KFUG Radio in Crescent City, California, 101.1 FM. The 1-hour weekly radio program that covers everything from alternative medicine, hypnosis, meditation, success, human interaction, alien abduction, and the question of, what is reality anyway, to name but a few.
Chapter 7 of the Kybalion by the Three Initiates. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 7. The All in All. While all is in the all, it is equally true that the all is in all. To him who truly understands this truth hath come great knowledge. The Kybalion. How often have the majority of people heard repeated the statement that their deity, called by many names, was all in all, and how little have they suspected the inner occult truth concealed by these carelessly uttered words. The commonly used expression is a survival of the ancient Hermetic maxim quoted above. As the Kybalion says, to him who truly understands this truth hath come great knowledge. And this being so, let us seek this truth, the understanding of which means so much. In this statement of truth, this Hermetic maxim, is concealed one of the greatest philosophical, scientific, and religious truths. We have given you the Hermetic teachings regarding the mental nature of the universe, the truth that the universe is mental, held in the mind of the All. As the Kybalion says in the passage quoted above, all is in the all, but note also the correlated statement that it is equally true that the all is in the all. This apparently contradictory statement is reconcilable under the law of paradox. It is, moreover, an exact Hermetic statement of the relations existing between the all and its mental universe. We have seen how all is in the all. Now let us examine the other aspect of the subject. The Hermetic teachings are to the effect that the all is immanent, in remaining within, inherent, abiding within, its universe, and in every part, particle, unit, or combination within the universe. The statement is usually illustrated by the teachers by a reference to the principle of correspondence. The teacher instructs the student to form a mental image of something, a person, an idea, something having a mental form, the favorite example being that of the author or dramatist forming an idea of his characters, or a painter or sculptor forming an image of an ideal that he wishes to express by his art. In each case, the student will find that while the image has its existence and being solely within his own mind, yet he, the student, author, dramatist, painter, or sculptor, is in a sense immanent in, remaining within, or abiding within, the mental image also. In other words, the entire virtue, life, spirit of reality in the mental image is derived from the immanent mind of the thinker. Consider this for a moment, until the idea is grasped. To take a modern example, let us say that Othello, Iago, Hamlet, Lear, Richard III existed merely in the mind of Shakespeare at the time of their conception or creation, and yet Shakespeare also existed within each of these characters, giving them their vitality, spirit, and action. Whose is the spirit of the characters that we know as Micawber, Oliver Twist, Uriah Heep? Is it Dickens? Or have each of these characters a personal spirit, independent of their creator? Have the Venus of Medici, the Sistine Madonna, the Apollo Belvedere, spirits and reality of their own, or do they represent the spiritual and mental powers of their creators? The law of paradox explains that both propositions are true, viewed from the proper viewpoints. Micawber is both Micawber and yet Dickens, and again, while Micawber may be said to be Dickens, Yet Dickens is not identical with Micawber. Man, like Micawber, may exclaim, "The spirit of my Creator is inherent within me, and yet I am not He." How different this is from the shocking half-truth, so vociferously announced by certain of the half-wise, who fill the air with their raucous cries of "I am God." Imagine poor Micawber, or the sneaky Uriah Heep, crying, "I am Dickens," or some of the lowly clods in one of Shakespeare's plays, eloquently announcing that "I am Shakespeare." The all is in the earthworm, and yet the earthworm is far from being the all. And still the wonder remains that though the earthworm exists merely as a lowly thing, created and having its being solely within the mind of the all, yet the all is immanent in the earthworm, and in the particles that go to make up the earthworm. Can there be any greater mystery than this of the all in the all, and the all in all? The student will, of course, realize that the illustrations given above are necessarily imperfect and inadequate, for they represent the creation of mental images and finite minds, while the universe is a creation of infinite mind, and the difference between the two poles separates them. And yet it is merely a matter of degree. The same principle is in operation. The principle of correspondence manifests in each. As above, so below; as below, so above. And in the degree that man realizes the existence of the indwelling spirit immanent within his being, so he will rise to the spiritual scale of life. This is what spiritual development means: the recognition, realization, and manifestation of the spirit within us. Try to remember this last definition, that of spiritual development. It contains the truth of true religion. There are many planes of being, many subplanes of life, many degrees of existence in the universe, and all depend upon the advancement of beings in the scale, of which scale the lowest point is the grossest matter, the highest being separated only by the thinnest division from the spirit of the all. And upward and onward along this scale of life, everything is moving. All are on the path, whose end is the all. All progress is returning home. All upward and onward, in spite of all seemingly contradictory appearances. Such is the message of the illumined. The Hermetic teachings concerning the process of the mental creation of the universe are that at the beginning of the creative cycle, the all, in its aspect of being, projects its will toward its aspect of becoming, and the process of creation begins. It is taught that the process consists of the lowering of vibration until a very low degree of vibratory energy is reached, at which point the grossest possible form of matter is manifested. This process is called the stage of involution, in which the all becomes involved or wrapped up in its creation. This process is believed by the Hermetists to have a correspondence to the mental process of an artist, writer, or inventor, who becomes so wrapped up in his mental creation as to almost forget his own existence, and who, for the time being, almost lives in his creation. If instead of wrapped we use the word wrapped, perhaps we will give a better idea of what is meant. The involuntary stage of creation is sometimes called the outpouring of the divine energy, just as the evolutionary state is called the indrawing. The extreme pole of the creative process is considered to be the furthest removed from the all, while the beginning of the evolutionary stage is regarded as the beginning of the return swing of the pendulum of rhythm, a coming home idea being held in all of the Hermetic teachings. The teachings are that during the outpouring, the vibrations become lower and lower until finally the urge ceases and the return swing begins. But there is this difference, that while in the outpouring the creative forces manifest compactly and as a whole, yet from the beginning of the evolutionary or indrawing stage there is manifested the law of individualization, that is, the tendency to separate into units of force, so that finally that which left the all as unindividualized energy returns to its source as countless highly developed units of life, having risen higher and higher in the scale by means of physical, mental, and spiritual evolution. The ancient Hermetists used the word meditation in describing the process of the mental creation of the universe in the mind of the All, the word contemplation also being frequently employed. But the idea intended seems to be that of the employment of the divine attention. Attention is a word derived from the Latin root, meaning to reach out, to stretch out, and so the act of attention is really a mental reaching out, extension, of mental energy, so that the underlying idea is readily understood when we examine the real meaning of attention. The Hermetic teachings regarding the process of evolution are that the All, having meditated upon the beginning of the creation, having thus established the material foundations of the universe, having thought it into existence, then gradually awakens or rouses from its meditation, and in so doing starts into manifestation the process of evolution on the material, mental, and spiritual planes, successively and in order. Thus the upward movement begins, and all begins to move spiritward. Matter becomes less gross, the units spring into being, the combinations begin to form, life appears and manifests in higher and higher forms, and the mind becomes more and more in evidence, the vibrations constantly becoming higher. In short, the entire process of evolution, in all its phases, begins and proceeds according to the established law of the indrawing process. All of this occupies eons upon eons of man's time, each eon containing countless millions of years, but yet the illumined inform us that the entire creation, including involution and evolution, of a universe, is but as the twinkle of the eye to the All. At the end of the countless cycles of eons of time, the All withdraws its attention, its contemplation and meditation of the universe, for the great work is finished, and all is withdrawn into the All from which it emerged. But mystery of mysteries, the spirit of each soul is not annihilated, but infinitely expanded. The created and the Creator are merged. Such is the report of the illumined. The above illustration of the meditation and subsequent awakening from meditation of the All is of course but an attempt of the teachers to describe the infinite process by a finite example, and yet, as below, so above. The difference is merely in degree, and just as the All arouses itself from the meditation upon the universe, so does man, in time, cease from manifesting upon the material plane, and withdraws himself more and more into the indwelling spirit, which is indeed the divine ego. There is one more matter of which we desire to speak in this lesson, and that comes very near to an invasion of the metaphysical field of speculation, although our purpose is merely to show the futility of such speculation. We allude to the question which inevitably comes to the mind of all thinkers who have ventured to seek the truth. The question is, why does the All create universes? The question may be asked in different forms, but the above is the gist of the inquiry. Men have striven hard to answer this question, but still there is no answer worthy of the name. Some have imagined that the All had something to gain by it, but that is absurd, for what could the All gain that it did not already possess? Others have sought the answer in the idea that the All wished something to love, and others that it created for pleasure or amusement, or because it was lonely, or to manifest its power. All puerile explanations and ideas belonging to the childish period of thought. Others have sought to explain the mystery by assuming that the All found itself compelled to create, by reason of its own internal nature, its creative instinct. This idea is in advance of the others, but its weak point lies in the idea of the All being compelled by anything, internal or external. If its internal nature, or creative instinct, compelled it to do anything, then the internal nature, or creative instinct would be the absolute instead of the all, and so accordingly that part of the proposition fails. And yet the all does create and manifest, and seems to find some kind of satisfaction in so doing, and it is difficult to escape the conclusion that in some infinite degree it must have what would correspond to an inner nature or creative instinct in man, with correspondingly infinite desire and will. It could not act unless it willed to act, and it would not will to act unless it desired to act, and it would not desire to act unless it obtained some satisfaction thereby. And all of these things would belong to an inner nature, and must be postulated as existing according to the law of correspondence. But still, we prefer to think of the all as acting entirely free from any influence, internal as well as external. That is the problem which lies at the root of difficulty, and the difficulty that lies at the root of the problem. Strictly speaking, there cannot be said to be any reason whatsoever for the all to act, for a reason implies a cause, and the all is above cause and effect, except when it wills to become a cause, at which time the principle is set into motion. So you see, the matter is unthinkable, just as the all is unknowable. Just as we say the all merely is, so we are compelled to say that the all acts because it acts. At the last, the all is all reason in itself, all law in itself, all action in itself, and it may be said truthfully that the all is its own reason, its own law, its own act, or still further, that the all, its reason, its act, its law, are one, all being names for the same thing. In the opinion of those who are giving you these present lessons, the answer is locked up in the inner self of the all, along with its secret of being. The law of correspondence, in our opinion, reaches only to that aspect of the all, which may be spoken of as the aspect of becoming. Back of that aspect is the aspect of being, in which all laws are lost in law, all principles merge into principle, and the all, principle, and being are identical, one and the same. Therefore, metaphysical speculation on this point is futile. We go into the matter here merely to show that we recognize the question, and also the absurdity of the ordinary answers of metaphysics and theology. In conclusion, it may be of interest to our students to learn that while some of the ancient and modern Hermetic teachers have rather inclined in the direction of applying the principle of correspondence to the question, with the result of the inner nature conclusion, still legends have it that Hermes, the Great, when asked this question by his advanced students, answered them by pressing his lips tightly together and not saying a word, indicating that there was no answer. But then he may have intended to apply the axiom of his philosophy, that the lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding, believing that even his advanced students did not possess the understanding which entitled them to the teaching. At any rate, if Hermes possessed the secret, he failed to impart it, and so far as the world is concerned, the lips of Hermes are closed regarding it. And where the great Hermes hesitated to speak, what mortal dare to teach? But remember that whatever be the answer to this problem, if indeed there be an answer, the truth remains that, while all is in the all, it is equally true that the all is in the all. The teaching on this point is emphatic, and we may add the concluding words of the quotation: "To him who truly understands this truth hath come great knowledge." End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8 of the Kybalion by the Three Initiates. Chapter 8. Planes of Correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. The Kybalion. The second great Hermetic principle embodies the truth that there is a harmony, agreement, and correspondence between the several planes of manifestation, life, and being, The truth is a truth, because all that is included in the universe emanates from the same source, and the same laws, principles, and characteristics apply to each unit or combination of units of activity, as each manifests its own phenomena upon its own plane. For the purpose of convenience of thought and study, the Hermetic philosophy considers that the universe may be divided into three great classes of phenomena, known as the three great planes, namely, 1. The great physical plane, 2. The great mental plane, 3. The great spiritual plane. These divisions are more or less artificial and arbitrary, for the truth is that all of the three divisions are but ascending degrees of the great scale of life, the lowest point of which is undifferentiated matter, and the highest point that of spirit. And moreover, the different planes shade into each other, so that no hard and fast division may be made between the higher phenomena of the physical and the lower of the mental, or between the higher of the mental and the lower of the physical. In short, the three great planes may be regarded as three great groups of degrees of life manifestation. While the purposes of this little book do not allow us to enter into an extended discussion of, or explanation of, the subject of these different planes, still we think it well to give a general description of the same at this point. At the beginning, we may as well consider the question so often asked by the neophyte, who desires to be informed regarding the meaning of the word plane, which term has been very freely used and very poorly explained in many recent works upon the subject of occultism. The question is generally about as follows: Is a plane a place having dimensions, or is it merely a condition or state? We answer, no, not a place, nor ordinary dimension of space, and yet more than a state or condition. It may be considered as a state or condition, and yet the state or condition is a degree of dimension, in a scale subject to measurement. Somewhat paradoxical, is it not? But let us examine the matter. A dimension, you know, is a measure in a straight line, relating to measure. The ordinary dimensions of space are length, breadth, and height, or perhaps length, breadth, height, thickness, or circumference. But there is another dimension of created things, or measure in a straight line, known to occultists, and to scientists as well, although the latter have not yet applied the term dimension to it. And this new dimension, which, by the way, is the much speculated about fourth dimension, is the standard used in determining the degrees or planes. The fourth dimension may be called the dimension of vibration. It is a fact well known to modern science, as well as to Hermetists, who have embodied the truth in their third Hermetic principle, that everything is in motion, everything vibrates, nothing is at rest. From the highest manifestation to the lowest, everything and all things vibrate. Not only do they vibrate at different rates of motion, but as in different directions and in different manner. The degrees of the rate of vibrations constitute the degrees of measurement on the scale of vibrations. In other words, the degrees of the fourth dimension. And these degrees form what occultists call planes. The higher the degree of rate of vibration, the higher the plane, and the higher manifestation of life occupying that plane. So that while a plane is not a place, nor yet a state or condition, yet it possesses qualities common to both. We shall have more to say regarding the subject of the scale of vibrations in our next lessons, in which we shall consider the Hermetic principle of vibration. You will kindly remember, however, that the three great planes are not actual divisions of the phenomena of the universe, but merely arbitrary terms used by the Hermeticists in order to aid in the thought and study of the various degrees and forms of universal activity in life. The atom of matter, the unit of force, the mind of man, and the being of the archangel are all but degrees in one scale, and all fundamentally the same, the difference between solely a matter of degree and rate of vibration. All are creations of the All, and have their existence solely within the infinite mind of the All. The Hermetists subdivide each of the great planes into 7 minor planes, and each of these latter are also subdivided into 7 subplanes, all divisions being more or less arbitrary, shading into each other, and adopted merely for convenience of scientific study and thought. The great physical plane and its 7 minor planes is that division of the phenomena of the universe which includes all that relates to physics or material things, forces, and manifestations. It includes all forms of that which we call matter, and all forms of that which we call energy or force. But you must remember that Hermetic philosophy does not recognize matter as a thing in itself, or as having a separate existence, even in the mind of the All. The teachings are that matter is but a form of energy, that is, energy at a low rate of vibrations of a certain kind, and accordingly the Hermetists classify matter under the head of energy, and give to it 3 of the 7 minor planes of the great physical plane. These 7 minor physical planes are as follows: 1. The plane of matter A. 2. The plane of matter B. 3. The plane of matter C. 4. The plane of ethereal substance. 5. The plane of energy A. 6. The plane of energy B. 7. The plane of energy C. The plane of matter A comprises the forms of matter in its form of solids, liquids, and gases, as generally recognized by the textbooks on physics. The plane of matter B comprises certain higher and more subtle forms of matter, of the existence of which modern science is but now recognizing, the phenomena of radiant matter, in its phases of radium, etc., belonging to the lower subdivision of this minor plane. The plane of matter C comprises forms of the most subtle and tenuous matter, the existence of which is not suspected by ordinary scientists. The plane of ethereal substance comprises that which science speaks of as the ether, a substance of extreme tenuity and elasticity, pervading all universal space, and acting as a medium for the transmission of waves of energy, such as light, heat, electricity, etc. This ethereal substance forms a connecting link between matter, so-called, and energy, and partakes of the nature of each. The Hermetic teachings, however, instruct that this plane has 7 subdivisions, as have all of the minor planes, and in fact there are 7 ethers, instead of but 1. Next above the plane of ethereal substance comes the plane of energy A, which comprises the ordinary forms of energy known to science, its 7 subplanes being respectively heat, light, magnetism, electricity, and attraction, including gravitation, cohesion, chemical affinity, etc., and several other forms of energy indicated by scientific experiments but not yet named or classified. The plane of energy B comprises 7 subplanes of higher forms of energy, not as yet discovered by science, but which have been called nature's finer forces, and which are called into operation in manifestations of certain forms of mental phenomena, and by which such phenomena becomes possible. The plane of energy C comprises 7 subplanes of energy, so highly organized that it bears many of the characteristics of life, but which is not recognized by the minds of men on the ordinary plane of development, being available for the use of beings on the spiritual plane alone. Such energy is unthinkable to ordinary man, and may be considered almost as the divine power. The beings employing the same are as gods compared even to the highest human types known to us. The great mental plane comprises those forms of living things known to us in ordinary life, as well as certain other forms not so well known except to the occultist. The classification of the 7 minor mental planes is more or less satisfactory and arbitrary, unless accompanied by elaborate explanations which are foreign to the purpose of this particular work, but we may as well mention them. They are as follows: 1. The plane of mental mind. 2. The plane of elemental mind A. 3. The plane of plant mind. 4. The plane of elemental mind B. 5. The plane of animal mind. 6. The plane of elemental mind C. 7. The plane of human mind. The plane of mineral mind comprises the states or conditions of the units or entities or groups and combinations of the same, which animate the forms known to us as minerals, chemicals, etc. These entities must not be confounded with the molecules, atoms, and corpuscles themselves, the latter being merely the material bodies or forms of these entities, just as a man's body is but his material form, and not himself. These entities may be called souls in one sense, and are living beings of a lower degree of development, life, and mind, just a little more than the units of living energy, which comprise the higher subdivisions of the highest physical plane. The average mind does not generally attribute the possession of mind, soul, or life to the mineral kingdom, but all occultists recognize the existence of the same, and modern science is rapidly moving forward to the point of view of the Hermetic in this respect. The molecules, atoms, and corpuscles have their loves and hates, likes and dislikes, attractions and repulsions, affinities and non-affinities, etc., and some of the more daring scientific minds have expressed the opinion that the desire and will, emotions and feelings, of the atoms differ only in degree from those of men. We have no time or space to argue this matter here. All occultists know it to be a fact, and others are referred to some of the more recent scientific works for outside corroboration. There are the usual 7 subdivisions to this plane. The plane of elemental mind A comprises the state or condition and degree of mental and vital development of a class of entities unknown to the average man, but recognized to occultists. They are invisible to the ordinary senses of man, but nevertheless exist and play their part of the drama of the universe. Their degree of intelligence is between that of the mineral and chemical entities on the one hand, and of the entities of the plant kingdom on the other. There are 7 subdivisions to this plane also. The plane of plant mind, in its 7 subdivisions, comprises the states or conditions of the entities comprising the kingdoms of the plant world, the vital and mental phenomena of which is fairly well understood by the average intelligent person. Many new and interesting scientific works regarding mind and life in plants have been published during the last decade. Plants have life, mind, and souls, as well as have the animals, man, and Superman. The plane of elemental mind B, in its 7 subdivisions, comprises the states and conditions of a higher form of elemental or unseen entities, playing their part in the general work of the universe, the mind and life of which form a part of the scale between the plane of plant mind and the plane of animal mind, the entities partaking of the nature of both. The plane of animal mind, in its 7 subdivisions, comprises the states and conditions of the entities, beings or souls, animating the animal forms of life, familiar to us all. It is not necessary to go into details regarding this kingdom or plane of life, for the animal world is as familiar to us as our own. The plane of elemental mind C, in its 7 subdivisions, comprises those entities or beings, invisible as are all such elemental forms, which partake of the nature of both animal and human life, in a degree and in certain combinations. The highest forms are semi-human in intelligence. The plane of human mind, in its 7 subdivisions, comprises those manifestations of life and mentality which are common to man, in his various grades, degrees, and divisions. In this connection, we wish to point out the fact that the average man of today occupies but the fourth subdivision of the plane of human mind, and only the most intelligent have crossed the borders of the fifth subdivision. It has taken the race millions of years to reach this stage, and it will take many more years for the race to move on to the sixth and seventh subdivisions and beyond. But remember that there have been races before us which have passed through these degrees and then on to higher planes. Our own race is the fifth, with stragglers from the fourth, which has set foot upon the path, and there are a few advanced souls of our own race who have outstripped the masses, and who have passed on to the sixth and seventh subdivision, and some few being still further on. The man of the sixth subdivision will be the Superman, he of the seventh will be the Overman. In our consideration of the 7 minor mental planes, we have merely referred to the 3 elementary planes in a general way. We do not wish to go into this subject in detail in this work, for it does not belong to this part of general philosophy and teachings. But we may say this much, in order to give you a little clearer idea of the relations of these planes to the more familiar ones. The elementary planes bear the same relation to the planes of mineral, plant, animal, and human mentality in life that the black keys on a piano do to the white keys. The white keys are sufficient to produce music, but there are certain scales, melodies, and harmonies in which the black keys play their part and in which their presence is necessary. They are also necessary as connecting links of soul condition, entity states, etc., between the several other planes, certain forms of development being attained therein, this last fact giving to the reader who can read between the lines a new light upon the processes of evolution, and a new key to the secret door of the leaps of life between kingdom and kingdom. The great kingdoms of elementals are fully recognized by all occultists, and the esoteric writings are full of mention of them. The readers of Bulwer's, Sinani, and similar tales will recognize the entities inhabiting these planes of life. Passing on from the great mental plane to the great spiritual plane, what shall we say? How can we explain these higher states of being, life, and mind to minds as yet unable to grasp and understand the higher subdivisions of the plane of human mind? The task is impossible. We can speak only in the most general terms. How may light be described to a man born blind? How sugar to a man who has never tasted anything sweet? How harmony to one born deaf? All that we can say is that the 7 minor planes of the great spiritual plane, each minor plane having its 7 subdivisions, comprise beings possessing life, mind, and form as far above that of man today as the latter is above the earthworm, mineral, or even certain forms of energy or matter. The life of these beings so far transcends ours that we cannot even think of the details of the same. Their minds so transcend ours that to them we scarcely seem to think, and our mental processes seem almost akin to material processes. The matter of which their forms are composed is of the highest planes of matter, nay, some are even said to be clothed in pure energy. What may be said of such beings? On the 7 minor planes of the great spiritual plane exist beings of whom we may speak of as angels, archangels, demigods. On the lower minor planes dwell those great souls whom we call masters and adepts. Above them come the great hierarchies of the angelic hosts, unthinkable to man, and above those come those who may without irreverence be called the gods. So high in the scale of being are they, their being, intelligence, and power being akin to those attributed by the races of men to their conceptions of deity. These beings are beyond even the highest flights of the human imagination, the word divine being the only one applicable to them. Many of these beings, as well as the angelic host, take the greatest interest in the affairs of the universe, and play an important part in its affairs. These unseen divinities and angelic helpers extend their influence freely and powerfully in the process of evolution and cosmic process. Their occasional intervention and assistance in human affairs have led to the many legends, beliefs, religions, and traditions of the race, past and present. They have superimposed their knowledge and power upon the world, again and again, all under the law of the All, of course. But yet, even the highest of these advanced beings exist merely as creations of, and in, the mind of the All, and are subject to the cosmic processes and universal laws. They are still mortal. We may call them gods if we like, but they are still but the elder brethren of the race, the advanced souls who have outstripped their brethren, and who have foregone the ecstasy of absorption by the All, in order to help the race on its upward journey along the path. But they belong to the universe, and are subject to its conditions. They are mortal, and their plane is below that of absolute spirit. Only the most advanced Hermetists are able to grasp the inner teachings regarding the state of existence, and the powers manifested on the spiritual planes. The phenomena is so much higher than that of the mental planes that a confusion of ideas would surely result from an attempt to describe the same. Only those whose minds have been carefully trained along the lines of Hermetic Philosophy for years, yes, only those who have brought with them from other incarnations the knowledge acquired previously, can comprehend just what is meant by the teachings regarding these spiritual planes. And much of these inner teachings is held by the Hermetists as being too sacred, important, and even dangerous for general public dissemination. The intelligent student may recognize what we mean by this when we state that the meaning of spirit, as used by the Hermetists, is akin to living power, animated force, inner essence, essence of life, etc., which meaning must not be confounded with that usually and commonly employed in connection with the term, i.e., religious, ecclesiastical, spiritual, ethereal, holy, etc., etc. To occultists the word spirit is used in the sense of the animating principle, carrying with it the idea of power, living energy, mystic force, and occultists know that that which is known to them as spiritual power may be employed for evil as well as good ends, in accordance with the principle of polarity, a fact which has been recognized by the majority of religions in their conceptions of Satan, Beelzebub, the devil, Lucifer, fallen angels, etc. And so the knowledge regarding these planes has been kept in the Holy of Holies, in all esoteric fraternities and occult orders, in the secret chamber of the temple. But this may be said here, that those who have attained high spiritual powers and have misused them have a terrible fate in store for them, and the swing of the pendulum of rhythm will inevitably swing them back to the furthest extreme of material existence, from which point they must retrace their steps spiritward along the weary rounds of the path, but always with the added torture of having always with them a lingering memory of the heights from which they fell owing to their evil actions. The legends of the fallen angels have a basis in actual facts, as all advanced occultists know. The striving for selfish power on the spiritual planes inevitably results in the selfish soul losing its spiritual balance and falling back as far as it had previously risen. But to even such a soul the opportunity of a return is given, and such souls make the return journey, paying the terrible penalty according to the invariable law. In conclusion, we would again remind you that according to the principle of correspondence, which embodies the truth, as above, so below, as below, so above, all of the 7 Hermetic principles are in full operation on all of the many planes, physical, mental, and spiritual. The principle of mental substance, of course, applies to all the planes, for all are held in the mind of the All. The principle of correspondence manifests in all, for there is correspondence, harmony, and agreement between the several planes. The principle of vibration manifests on all planes. In fact, the very differences that go to make the planes arise from vibration, as we have explained. The principle of polarity manifests on each plane, the extremes of the poles being apparently opposite and contradictory. The principle of rhythm manifests on each plane, the movement of the phenomena having its ebb and flow, rise and flow, incoming and outgoing. The principle of cause and effect manifests on each plane, every effect having its cause, and every cause having its effect. The principle of gender manifests on each plane, the creative energy being always manifest, and operating along the lines of its masculine and feminine aspects. As above, so below; as below, so above. This centuries-old Hermetic axiom embodies one of the great principles of universal phenomena. As we proceed with our consideration of the remaining principles, we will see even more clearly the truth of the universal nature of this great principle of correspondence. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9 of the Kybalion by the Three Initiates. Chapter 9. Vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. The Kybalion. The great third Hermetic principle, the principle of vibration, embodies the truth that motion is manifest in everything in the universe, that nothing is at rest, that everything moves, vibrates, and circles. This Hermetic principle was recognized by some of the early Greek philosophers who embodied it in their systems, but then, for centuries it was lost sight of by the thinkers outside of the Hermetic ranks. But in the 19th century, physical science rediscovered the truth, and the 20th century scientific discoveries have added additional proof of the correctness and truth of this centuries-old Hermetic doctrine. The Hermetic teachings are that not only is everything in constant movement and vibration, but that the differences between the various manifestations of the universal power are due entirely to the varying rate and mode of vibrations. Not only this, but that even the All in itself manifests a constant vibration of such infinite degree of intensity and rapid motion that it may be practically considered as at rest, the teachers directing the attention of the students to the fact that even on the physical plane a rapidly moving object, such as a revolving wheel, seems to be at rest. The teachings are to the effect that spirit is at one end of the pole of vibration, and the other pole being certain extremely gross forms of matter. Between these two poles are millions upon millions of different rates and modes of vibration. Modern science has proven that all that we call matter and energy are but modes of vibratory motion, and some of the more advanced scientists are rapidly moving toward the positions of the occultists, who hold that the phenomena of mind are likewise modes of vibration or motion. Let us see what science has to say regarding the question of vibrations in matter and energy. In the first place, science teaches that all matter manifests, in some degree, the vibrations arising from temperature or heat. Be an object cold or hot, both being but degrees of the same thing, it manifests certain heat vibrations, and in a sense is in motion and vibration. Then all particles of matter are in circular movement, from corpuscle to suns. The planets revolve around suns, and many of them turn on their axes. The suns move around greater central points, and these are believed to move around still greater, and so on, ad infinitum. The molecules of which the particular kinds of matter are composed are in a state of constant vibration and movement around each other and against each other. The molecules are composed of atoms, which likewise are in a state of constant movement and vibration. The atoms are composed of corpuscles, sometimes called electrons, ions, etc., which also are in a state of rapid motion, revolving around each other, and which manifest a very rapid state and mode of vibration. and so we see that all forms of matter manifest vibration in accordance with the Hermetic principle of vibration. And so it is with various forms of energy. Science teaches that light, heat, magnetism, and electricity are but forms of vibratory motion connected in some way with, and probably emanating from the ether. Science does not as yet attempt to explain the nature of phenomena known as cohesion, which is the principle of molecular attraction, nor chemical affinity, which is the principle of atomic attraction, nor gravitation, the greatest mystery of the three, which is the principle of attraction by which every particle or mass of matter is bound to every other particle or mass. These three forms of energy are not as yet understood by science, yet the writers incline to the opinion that these too are manifestations of some form of vibratory energy, a fact which the Hermetists have held and taught for ages past. The universal ether, which is postulated by science without its nature being understood clearly, is held by the Hermetists to be but a higher manifestation of that which is erroneously called matter, that is to say, matter at a higher degree of vibration, and is called by them the ethereal substance. The Hermetists teach that this ethereal substance is of extreme tenuity and elasticity and pervades universal space, serving as a medium of transmission of waves of vibratory energy such as heat, light, electricity, magnetism, etc. The teachings are that the ethereal substance is a connecting link between the forces of vibratory energy known as matter on the one hand, and energy or force on the other, and also that it manifests a degree of vibration, in rate and mode, entirely its own. Scientists have offered the illustration of a rapidly moving wheel, top, or cylinder to show the effects of increasing rates of vibration. The illustration supposes a wheel, top, or revolving cylinder running at a low rate of speed. We will call this revolving thing the object in the following illustration. Let us suppose the object is moving slowly. It may be seen readily, but no sound of its movement reaches the ear. The speed is gradually increased. In a few moments its movement becomes so rapid that a deep growl or low note may be heard. Then, as the rate is increased, the note rises one in the musical scale. Then, the motion still being further increased, the next highest note is distinguished. Then, one after another, all the notes of the musical scale appear, rising higher and higher as the motion is increased. Finally, when the motions have reached a certain rate, the final note perceptible to human ears is reached, and the shrill, piercing shriek dies away, and silence follows. No sound is heard from the revolving object, the rate of motion being so high that the human ear cannot register the vibrations. Then comes the perception of rising degrees of heat. Then, after quite a time, the eye catches a glimpse of the object becoming a dull, dark, reddish color. As the rate increases, the red becomes brighter. Then, as the speed is increased, the red melts into an orange. Then the orange melts into a yellow. Then follow, successively, the shades of green, blue, indigo, and finally violet as the rate of speed increases. Then the violet shades away, and all color disappears, the human eye not being able to register them. But there are invisible rays emanating from the revolving object, the rays that are used in photographing, and other subtle rays of light. Then begin to manifest the peculiar rays known as the X-rays, etc., as the constitution of the object changes. Electricity and magnetism are emitted when the appropriate rate of vibration is attained. When the object reaches a certain rate of vibration, its molecules disintegrate and resolve themselves into the original elements or atoms. Then the atoms, following the principle of vibration, are separated into the countless corpuscles of which they are composed. And finally, even the corpuscles disappear, and the object may be said to be composed of the ethereal substance. Science does not dare to follow the illustration further, but the Hermetists teach that if the vibrations be continually increased, the object would mount up the successive states of manifestation, and would in turn manifest the various mental stages, and then on spiritward, until it would finally re-enter the All, which is Absolute Spirit. The object, however, would have ceased to be an object long before the stage of ethereal substance was reached, but otherwise the illustration is correct, inasmuch as it shows the effect of constantly increased rates and modes of vibration. It must be remembered in the above illustration that the stages at which the object throws off vibrations of light, heat, etc., is not actually resolved into those forms of energy, which are much higher in the scale, but simply that it reaches a degree of vibration in which those forms of energy are liberated, in a degree, from the confining influences of its molecules, atoms and corpuscles, as the case may be. These forms of energy, although much higher in the scale than matter, are imprisoned and confined in the material combinations, by reasons of the energies manifesting through and using material forms, but thus becoming entangled and confined in their creations of material forms, and to which extent is true of all creations, the creating force becoming involved in its creation. But the Hermetic teachings go much further than do those of modern science. They teach that all manifestation of thought, emotion, reason, will or desire, or any mental state or condition, are accompanied by vibrations, a portion of which are thrown off and which tend to affect the minds of other persons, by induction. This is the principle which produces the phenomena of telepathy, mental influence, and other forms of the action and power of mind over mind, with which the general public is rapidly becoming acquainted, owing to the wide dissemination of occult knowledge by the various schools, cults, and teachers along these lines at this time. Every thought, emotion, or mental state has its corresponding rate and mode of vibration, and by an effort of the will of the person, or of other persons, these mental states may be reproduced, just as a musical tone may be reproduced, by causing an instrument to vibrate at a certain rate, just as a color may be reproduced in the same way. By a knowledge of the principle of vibration, as applied to mental phenomena, one may polarize his mind at any degree he wishes, thus gaining a perfect control over his mental states, moods, etc. In the same way he may affect the minds of others, producing the desired mental states in them. In short, he may be able to produce on the mental plane that which science produces on the physical plane, namely, vibrations at will. This power, of course, may be acquired only by the proper instruction, exercises, practice, etc., the science being that of mental transmutation, one of the branches of the Hermetic art. A little reflection on what we have said will show the student that the principle of vibration underlies the wonderful phenomena of the power manifested by the masters and adepts, who are able to apparently set aside the laws of nature, but who, in reality, are simply using one law against another, one principle against others, and who accomplish their results by changing the vibrations of material objects or forms of energy, and thus perform what are commonly called miracles. As one of the old Hermetic writers has truly said, "He who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power." End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10 of the Kybalion by the Three Initiates. Chapter 10. Polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. The Kybalion. The great fourth Hermetic principle, the principle of polarity, embodies the truth that all manifested things have two sides, two aspects, two poles, a pair of opposites, with manifold degrees between the two extremes. The old paradoxes, which have ever perplexed the mind of men, are explained by an understanding of this principle. Man has always recognized something akin to this principle, and has endeavored to express it by such sayings, maxims, and aphorisms as the following: everything is and isn't at the same time. All truths are but half-truths. Every truth is half false. There are two sides to everything. There is a reverse side to every shield, etc. The Hermetic teachings are to the effect that the differences between things, seemingly diametrically opposed to each other, are merely a matter of degree. It teaches that the pairs of opposites may be reconciled, and that thesis and antithesis are identical in nature, but different in degree, and that the universal reconciliation of opposites is effected by a recognition of this principle of polarity. The teachers claim that illustrations of this principle may be had on every hand, and from an examination into the real nature of anything. They begin by showing that spirit and matter are but the two poles of the same thing, the intermediate planes being merely degrees of vibration. They show that the all and the many are the same, the differences being merely a matter of degree of mental manifestation. Thus the law and laws are the two opposite poles of one thing. Likewise, principle and principles, infinite mind and finite mind. Then passing on to the physical plane, they illustrate the principle by showing that heat and cold are identical in nature, the differences being merely a matter of degrees. The thermometer shows many degrees of temperature, the lowest pole being called cold, the highest heat. Between these two poles are many degrees of heat or cold. Call them either, and you are equally correct. The higher of 2 degrees is always warmer, while the lower is always colder. There is no absolute standard. All is a matter of degree. There is no place on the thermometer where heat ceases and cold begins. It is all a matter of higher or lower vibrations. The very terms high and low, which we are compelled to use, are but poles of the same thing. The terms are relative. So with east and west, travel around the world in an eastward direction, and you reach a point which is called west at your starting point, and you return from that westward point. Travel far enough north, and you will find yourself traveling south, or vice versa. Light and darkness are poles of the same thing, with many degrees between them. The musical scale is the same. Starting with C, you move upward until you reach another C, and so on, the differences between the two ends of the board being the same, with many degrees between the two extremes. The scale of color is the same, higher and lower vibrations being the only difference between high violet and low red. Large and small are relative, so are noise and quiet. Hard and soft follow the rule. Likewise sharp and dull. Positive and negative are two poles of the same thing, with countless degrees between them. Good and bad are not absolute. We call one end of the scale good and the other bad, or one end good and the other evil, according to the use of terms. A thing is less good than the thing higher in the scale, but that less good thing is in turn more good than the thing next below it, and so on, the more or less being regulated by the position on the scale. And so it is on the mental plane. Love and hate are generally regarded as things being diametrically opposed to each other, entirely different, unreconcilable. But we apply the principle of polarity, and we find that there is no such thing as absolute love or absolute hate, as distinguished from each other. The two are merely terms applied to the two poles of the same thing. Beginning at any point of the scale we find more love or less hate, as we ascend the scale, and more hate or less love, as we descend. This being true no matter from what point, high or low, we may start. There are degrees of love and hate, and there is a middle point where like and dislike become so faint that it is difficult to distinguish between them. Courage and fear come under the same rule. The pairs of opposites exist everywhere. Where you find one thing you find its opposite, the two poles. And it is this fact that enables the Hermetist to transmute one mental state into another, along the lines of polarization. Things belonging to different classes cannot be transmuted into each other, but things of the same class may be changed, that is, may have their polarity changed. Thus love never becomes east or west, or red or violet, but it may and often does turn into hate, and likewise hate may be transformed into love by changing its polarity. Courage may be transmuted into fear, and the reverse. Hard things may be rendered soft, dull things become sharp, hot things become cold, and so on, the transmutation always being between things of the same kind of different degrees. Take the case of a fearful man. By raising his mental vibrations along the line of fear-courage, he can be filled with the highest degree of courage and fearlessness, and likewise, the slothful man may change himself into an active, energetic individual, simply by polarizing along the lines of the desired quality. The student who is familiar with the processes by which the various schools of mental science, etc., produce changes in the mental states of those following their teachings, may not readily understand the principle underlying many of these changes. When, however, the principle of polarity is once grasped, it is seen that the mental changes are occasioned by a change of polarity, a sliding along the same scale. The latter is readily understood. The change is not in the nature of transmutation of one thing into another thing entirely different, but merely is a change of degree in the same things, a vastly important difference. For instance, borrowing an analogy from the physical plane, it is impossible to change heat into sharpness, loudness, highness, etc., but heat may readily be transmuted into cold, simply by lowering the vibrations. In the same way hate and love are mutually transmutable, so are fear and courage. But fear cannot be transformed into love, nor can courage be transmuted into hate. The mental states belong to innumerable classes, each class of which has its opposite poles, along which transmutation is possible. The student will readily recognize that in the mental states, as well as in the phenomena of the physical plane, the two poles may be classified as positive and negative, respectively. Thus love is positive to hate, courage to fear, activity to non-activity, etc., etc. And it will also be noticed that even to those unfamiliar with the principle of vibration, the positive pole seems to be of a higher degree than the negative, and readily dominates it. The tendency of nature is in the direction of the dominant activity of the positive pole. In addition to the changing of the poles of one's own mental states by the operation of the art of polarization, the phenomena of mental influence, in its manifold phases, shows us that the principle may be extended so as to embrace the phenomena of the influence of one mind over that of another, of which so much has been written and taught of late years. When it is understood that mental induction is possible, that is, that mental states may be produced by induction from others, then we can readily see how a certain rate of vibration or polarization of a certain mental state may be communicated to another person, and his polarity in that class of mental states thus changed. It is along this principle that the results of many of the mental treatments are obtained. For instance, a person is blue, melancholy, and full of fear. A mental scientist, bringing his own mind up to the desired vibration by his trained will, and thus obtaining the desired polarization in his own case, then produces a similar mental state in the other by induction, the result being that the vibrations are raised, and the person polarizes towards the positive end of the scale instead of toward the negative, and his fear and other negative emotions are transmuted to courage and other positive mental states. A little study will show you that these mental changes are nearly all along the line of polarization, the change being one of degree rather than of kind. A knowledge of the existence of this great Hermetic principle will enable the student to better understand his own mental states and those of other people. He will see that these states are all matters of degree, and seeing thus, he will be able to raise or lower the vibration at will, to change his mental poles, and thus be master of his mental states, instead of being their servant and slave. And by his knowledge he will be able to aid his fellows intelligently, and by the appropriate methods, change the polarity when the same is desirable. We advise all students to familiarize themselves with this principle of polarity, for a correct understanding of the same will throw light on many different subjects. End of Chapter 10. Recording by Andrea Fiore.
Thank you for listening to The World According to Pleiades on KFUG Radio in Crescent City, California. If you have any topics you'd like covered, or you feel you have the potential to make a good interviewee, please send your suggestions and/or information to KFUG Radio, 270 I Street, Crescent City, California, 95531. Attention, Pleiades. Or email me at radiointerview@moonstar-enterprises.com. That's radiointerview@moonstar-enterprises.com. My name is Pleiades Moonstar, and I love you.